The following program contains names, places, and events that have been anonymized or fictionalized for the purposes of protection and safety. The following program is provided for entertainment purposes only, and any commentary from the hosts are strictly conjecture and should not be held as making any definitive statements about the truth or identity of any particular individuals or circumstances. If you or a loved one are involved in an abusive relationship, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1 800 799 7233 for support.
Happy Dating Detectives Monday.
Woohoo! We're here.
I don't know if that was a real woohoo. Poor
I don't know if it
Hannah.
was. I'll give it an update. Molly and we live in Los Angeles, but we are safe and not in Los Angeles. Our homes are okay. We weren't in a terrible area, but it's just all a terrible area. So we're both safely outside of LA. But I mean,
I'm just glad you guys are okay and have somewhere to retreat to. And I'm just, all the fires in LA have just been crazy. So I'm just so sorry you guys are experiencing that.
I'm so sorry if anyone listening has people they know or are in areas where they've lost something or lost everything or are just feeling unsafe and I mean, it's just devastating. So
yeah, I just can't even imagine. So our hearts go out to you. We want you to know that we love you. I'm so
and I can't
sorry.
believe that we both live in, like, it was it feels like just yesterday that Mackenzie was dealing with the hurricanes and now we're over here. It's making me really value community and like community care and mutual air, mutual aid, mutual air. That was a Freudian slip because I can't breathe the air in Los Angeles.
It is not breathable. The water's not drinkable.
I know. It made me, honestly, as I was driving to my family's in Las Vegas, I was thinking a lot about how it's like, I'm so grateful for all of the firefighters and responders and systems that are in place to help us. But also, the thing we can control, and a lot of times the most, is just how we show up for the person who lives next door. And I was thinking about our podcast.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah. And we have, like, it's not the same department, but like we have a lot of people who have come on who have stories where people weren't supported. Maybe they didn't have the money to get an attorney, or they didn't know the resources that they could find, or there weren't enough resources. And it's like, I'm grateful that we have a community of people who like show up independently as a community.
No, absolutely. I just, that's what I love about our podcast is the sense of community that we've kind of created. So it's really that I love. And so just know that our hearts are here with you and we love you. And we are just everything's just so devastating.
I know. And we're recording this outro on Friday. So if I'm like a little out of it, it's just because I like drove away from Los Angeles last night.
How long is that drive?
It's like 4.5 hours.
Oh, yeah.
That my brothers, y'all.
Kind of a long drive. But speaking of the hurricanes, though, the hurricanes were several months ago, and we are just now starting next week. The contractors are coming to fix my house. So it's kind of crazy when you think about how long people are going to be like suffering and dealing with this loss. So anyways, our hearts go out to you and we love you. But let's get into the podcast. Yes. That's why we're here. So we're going to do, girl, we got a lot of good responses.
I am so excited for the debrief. I'm nervous, honestly, for the debrief because it's a difficult conversation, but I'm grateful that we get to have it. So just know that last week we like didn't get into stuff too deep because we want to at the end of this episode, and we will take into account your many thoughts and responses. So thank you, as always.
I have to say that I'm really fond of our listeners. Like our sleuthies. Well, let me just say that everybody is, regardless of their opinion or their thoughts or what they, that whatever, everybody has been so kind and so like very mature, like everybody's been able to give their opinions without being like a dickhead about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I didn't really care for him. Like he kind of rubbed me the wrong way on this, but there was nothing that was overtly like just mean or cruel. And I gotta say, I have so much respect for our listeners and how you can have like adult conversations, friendly debates. And I really respect and appreciate that about our listeners. So thank you guys for being kind, even on something that you might not agree with or whatever. And I feel like that's the support that we need.
I so agree. And also can like echo a lot of what you guys were feeling. I loved also the ability to kind of like check our own bias and admit when we're wrong. Like somebody wrote something, we can talk about it more later, where they just were like, I was on a roller coaster. I didn't know who he was. And at first I kind of thought about I thought about his words differently because he's a man. And then I kind of reversed it. And I went through that too. And I think it's great that we can acknowledge that most of the time we're talking about women, we are women, we're girls. It does change things when it's not a woman telling the story, but that doesn't change how we want to show up for them and care for them. But it is a different conversation. So we'll talk more in the debrief, guys. Let's recap.
Okay, go.
Clayton is a bachelor.
From the literal show Bachelor.
The literal Bachelor. Yes. He's not just a single man. He was on The Bachelorette first, and then he went on The Bachelor.
Not super well liked on The Bachelor.
Yeah. Although I will say a lot of people were commenting he wasn't as hated as he thinks he is, which I hope he reads those. I hope he hears that.
Yes, that was really interesting too, because Hannah and I aren't we're not Bachelor Nation girls. We know what the show is, but we're not avid watchers. And so it was nice that we were able to hear his story from a totally unbiased position of just what happened. And we didn't see what a lot of you Bachelor Nation people saw. So a lot of what happened to him after going on the show, a lot of people were like, oh, well, that's karma. And it was just really interesting how I wonder if the same thing would be said if it was a woman. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, you hope not. But then again, it's the whole short skirt phenomenon where people are like, well, you wore a short skirt, so that's what happens. And it's like, guys, no. Anyway. So yes, he comes off The Bachelor. Dating life is completely changed because he's in the spotlight, and he is cautious for a while, but then he's kind of he's he seemed pretty grounded. He was like, I'm still the same person.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to keep things as normal as possible. Mm-hmm. So then he had a brief hookup, which he explained it didn't have any of the baby making situations. There was, the bases didn't get to home run, if you know what I mean. And he had one hookup with somebody he was a realtor. She was interested in working with him as a realtor. So he was, admitted kind of some murky ground, but it happens. And then he shut it down, was not interested in pursuing the relationship further. And she said, well, guess what? I'm pregnant. She said things like, I will get an abortion if you date me for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, then I'm having that baby. It's unimaginable.
How do you even say that to someone?
Unimaginable. And then, we don't need to go into detail. You should go back and listen to part 2. But part 1. Now we're on part 2.
We won't ruin it for you, but it was.
But basically, he's fighting this woman and, being a bit gaslit, being legally pursued and not really sure how to handle it because he's like, I don't think she's pregnant. I do not believe she's pregnant. We left off where he's still battling this, but he's now realized that there are other men who have gone through the same thing with her.
There's other victims. So today you're going to hear the second part of the story, and holy bananas. But also, you guys who listened to our new sister podcast called The Medical Detectives.
It's out. Go listen anywhere you get podcasts. The first episode is great. It's so good.
The Medical Detectives, so a new episode will drop every Wednesday. And so The Medical Detectives is basically just what we do, except in the medical line of things. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I feel like everyone has a story or knows somebody who has dealt with a false diagnosis or
malpractice, something.
Yes. And, it's
horror
important that
stories of something medical.
And we're not doctors. We don't know what we're doing when we walk into, we trust
them.
And I'm not saying, the host, Dr. Aaron, is a doctor, and the other host, Anna, is amazing. And the first episode is her story with her health journey. So go listen because you'll fall in love with them. And they're the same vibe, It's like we are so proud of our producer, Molly, for continuing this storytelling type.
The comment so far is that everyone seems to really be loving it. And somebody even said, I love it more than I thought I would. They're not big into medical shows or whatever, but they like the dating detective. So they tried it. So I think that's really cool. So thank you for that. There's a link to it in the show notes. So go check it out.
Medical Detectives. And then as always, our Patreon, $5 a month. Join, get more info.
It's only $5 a month. You get 2 bonus episodes. So please join the Patreon. And just so you know, when you join the Patreon, that $5, it just contributes to the show monetarily. It just helps us to bring you more quality and content and keep us going. So we really, really appreciate your support there. But we also just appreciate just when you listen and share, when you share on your socials, that's such a big deal because that's the way of the world now. So thank you so much.
We love you guys, and
I think
gotta
we should
get into it.
You guys are gonna just listen to this episode. You won't believe your ears.
Clayton, the floor is yours.
After it goes public, not even 24 hours later, I get a DM. And the DM said, "Hey, you need to look into this court case. You're not the only one."
From who? Who said it?
It was from the now fiance of the victim before me.
What?
Oh, so this is what she does.
So I am blown away, and I am just shocked. And I'm like, what? So she gives me a court case number. So I go in the next day and it's publicly accessible. So I pull all the files and I'm reading the screenshot of the text messages, and it's like verbatim. She's using the same words. It's the same story. She claims she got pregnant off of a one night stand, and she's pregnant with twins. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this girl has done this before. But as I'm looking into the court docs and reading in that doc, I see another name. And I'm like, what?
Oh, no.
And there's a guy before him. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I reach out to the last guy, victim number 3. And I'm like, dude, can we meet up? And so he walked in and I looked at him as he's walking up, and I just laughed and I said, she clearly has a type, because he was, he's 6'5", 280 pounds or whatever he is. I'm 6'5", 260. So we just laughed. And then it just felt like we already knew each other, and I'd already went through so much. I mean, at that point, I'd talked to him on the phone multiple times for sometimes an hour a day, because he had become the person that was quelling my fear of, I thought potentially I was like, this girl is either the craziest woman I've ever met, or she's telling the truth. And so there was still a part of me that thought, like, is she just not providing me evidence to mess with me, but she actually is pregnant? Like, she's just trying to screw with me and make this like as torturous as possible. So I still, in the back of my head, was like, I can't fully prove that she's not pregnant. Because I don't know, like nothing she's doing is making any sense. So for me to apply logic and say, oh, if she's pregnant, she would have provided evidence, I was like, maybe she's just sick in the head and wants to, like drag this. And so very quickly, the previous victim became that voice of reason that said, dude, she has no evidence. I'm telling you, she does this where she makes it seem like she has stuff. She has nothing. She's not pregnant. You don't have to worry. Like I exist now. And so does the previous guy and the previous guy. And so you're just another one of them. And I said, well, what if I'm the one that she finally decided to actually get pregnant with? And he said, dude, no, she's running the same con she's always run. And so the first time that I saw him, it was just like, it felt like a brotherhood. It felt very calming. And it was just to know that I wasn't alone, and to see him in person. And it was just like, okay, this is my guy. Like, this is my friend. This is my confidant, the guy that I can walk through this with. And so we spent hours on the phone from that point forward, just kind of helping each other get through it. And I had mentioned that I had acquired an ultrasound from her lawyer that I had grabbed whenever we were in a Zoom meeting. And I said, I tried to reverse Google image search it. Nothing comes up. And he goes, well, that's funny, because that's because she's learned. And I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, because she did that in my case. So the reason why I couldn't find that ultrasound online was because the previous guy did catch her through a reverse Google search.
Oh, no.
And he submitted it to the courts, and he was like, I found this photo. It's a photo from a mom.
It's from clip art.
It's from a mommy blog. So I go on at this point, like everyone's tearing me apart online and ripping me to shreds. He's a piece of shit. This tracks. He's a shitty bachelor. He's still a shitty person. Everyone's running with these narratives and not believing me one bit. And so I got to put out a public statement. Like, I have to regain the narrative. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this a public matter, because she did. I'm going to basically, from here on out, the court of public opinion is going to follow along with this journey. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just lay it all out there. So I say, hey guys, yes, this is, happening, but it's not true. I am actively fighting this in court, the Phoenix Superior Courts. It goes public. And she kept sending me messages. She texted me from a total of 13 different numbers. I would block one. She would use a Google Voice number and get another one. And then she was sending me over to my email was continued to send me messages, and she had mail trackers on it. So she knew that I was reading them, even though I had them in my block folder. She saw that I was still viewing them. And so she continued to send emails to me. And I got to a point where I was tired of her interacting with me and sending me messages. So finally, I'm like, I'm going to get an order of protection against her. I'm going to stop her from being able to respond to me.
Okay.
Well, then she gets one against me in retaliation. And that's a whole other thing that frustrated me. Like, I get mine. They make me go to court and have to explain. She gets hers. They don't even make her go to court. They're just like, yep. So I then go into court to basically try to get the order of protection knocked off and try to uphold I got an injunction against harassment because I was being petty, because which I should have gotten the order of protection. My pettiness actually ended up backfiring on me. So the difference between the two is like you get an injunction against harassment against a stranger, someone like in your work, like workplace harassment. And order of protection is more for somebody that you know on a personal basis. Like it could be like a friend.
So you were trying to make a statement that like, not only do I not want to talk to her, I don't even know her.
Yeah, like I barely know this woman. She's a stranger. So out of pettiness, I got the injunction against harassment. Well, it ended up, I should have got the order because the order would have been in effect for 2 years. My injunction was in effect for 1 year. Oh. So it is what it is. I got it blocked regardless.
Well, thank you for sharing what you've learned about those two things for future reference.
So the order of protection lasts longer, at least in the state of Arizona. So I had to go into court to get that injunction. So I go into court, mind you, by myself, no lawyer. She has a lawyer. And I'm like, and again, this is where I'm stubborn, and I've always been stubborn to some degree. I was like, hey, I'm innocent.
So I don't need a lawyer.
So she's going to have to prove she's pregnant. Very simple, right? Like I'm going to go into this courthouse and be like, Your Honor, she's not pregnant. So she needs to prove she's pregnant. Yeah. That's it. She's faking it. And so she comes in virtually. I go in person, and I end up getting like an extension where the judge is like, hey, I can't rule on this. We're going to extend this into the next week, and I'll have you return. And then I'll make this decision as far as whether or not I uphold this. Like we ran out of time today. I get out of the courtroom and I get a text from this podcaster, and he goes, hey, you did good in there. And I said, what? He's like, yeah. He goes, you actually represented yourself really well. I said, how do you know?
What are you talking about?
And he goes, did you not know it was live streamed?
Oh, what?
My goodness.
And I was like, what? He goes, oh yeah. He's like, it was like 10,000 people watched it. And I was like, what?
Did they not tell you?
No, we did not have any clue. So a gift from above, a godsend. It was the best thing for me because in that video, she showed up virtually. And I didn't see this when I was in the court because I wasn't looking at the screen, but she was shifting her belly around, moving it.
No,
oh my gosh.
Up.
Like Santa Claus in the mall? Like
it's all moving the pillow around.
She had a prosthetic. Yeah. So she's shifting it and moving it in a frame so the judge can see it. Like, I'm pregnant. Look at me. And so people are like, she's not pregnant. Like that's not you can't move a bump like that. And so people obviously are like, this is not real. Everyone's like, no belly moves like that. Well, she in the meantime was like posting to Reddit in a Dropbox file, and she had photos that she was posting and a video even of her pregnant belly. And it like kind of looked pregnant, but it was also like, well, could she have just like bloated herself?
She just had tacos.
Like, we have AI now. We have prosthetics.
Yeah. So that ended up being great because then what happened was it was live stream and everyone's like, he's a dumbass. Why is he self-representing? So I then get reached out to by a lawyer, and he's like, dude, you can't represent yourself. And I was like, I understand. I said, but like, I can't pay you. I said, you guys, I've looked you up. You're too expensive. You're $500 an hour. And then he's like, well, we'll represent you for this next week. And so I'm like, okay. And so I get my injunction, but then that was filed separately from family court. That was like in criminal court, but then I still had the family court open.
And the family court case was to deal with the parenting plan she served me with. So I really had to prove she wasn't pregnant. And even if she was, I was not the father. So I needed a paternity test, but no one would give us one because she was pregnant with twins. And this is when I figured out the whole reason she chose twins is because she found out that most labs won't do a paternity test when twins are involved.
What?
Why?
Yeah, because there's a small chance that there could be two separate fathers. And so because they don't want to run the risk of telling someone they're not the father when they could be, and they could have potentially got the DNA of one child and not the other when they took the swab, they don't, a lot of facilities won't do it. And that's why she chooses twins. Is because she was trying to dodge having to do a paternity test. But then I was like, thankfully I'm stubborn. I was like, there's gotta be somebody that'll do it.
Yeah.
And I found, the facility, shout out Ravgen, maybe I'll get sponsored by them one day.
Sponsored by a paternity test facility.
Paternity test facility. So I told her, I go, we're going to do this paternity test. And she, at first is like, I'll schedule it. She schedules it for both of us. Then the day before the paternity test, I get a call saying, hey, like we just, you canceled, or it said like that I canceled. And I'm like, and so all of a sudden I see her, she like goes, I'm like, no, she set me up. I call and I'm like, I didn't cancel. And they're like, we got a call that you canceled. I was like, no, I did not cancel. Meanwhile, she's going on Reddit because she's telling her story anonymously on Reddit. And so she's feeding this Reddit audience. It's like, he canceled. And everyone's like, oh, he's guilty and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. So I call and I set it up. And I'm like, I'm setting this up. I set up the testing facility. And then I screenshot the receipt and I posted on my story. And I'm like, hey, everybody, I scheduled a paternity test for this date. And now she has to schedule hers. And then I will let you know the results once we get them back. So I forced her hand now. I'm like, hey, you don't get to keep dodging, canceling my appointments and dodging. Now you have to. Like, you got to, because I'm telling everybody, like, hey, I'm good to go. Like,
good for you, though.
And so she ends up scheduling and she cancels. And then I go online right away. I'm like, she canceled. And she's like emailing me from another blocked email. No, like, you don't say I canceled. Like, I got sick. And so she's on Reddit. Like, I was sick. That's why I canceled. So everyone's like, well, then reschedule. So now everyone's kind of holding her accountable. Like, well, then reschedule. Well, then the day of, I'm like, she's going to cancel again. She doesn't. She takes the test. And I'm like, now my heart drops. Cause I'm like, if she's not pregnant, then why would she take the test? So now I'm like back to being like freaked out. I'm like, wait, this makes no sense. Like, she's going to get caught. And so I'm like, what? This is not making sense. So I'm racking my brain. I'm like, why would she do this? And then I Google, because I Google everything. And so I was like, what would happen if you take a paternity test and you're not pregnant? And it said that if you're not pregnant, the test will come back as inconclusive. And so I'm like, okay. And so I call up the lab tech. I said, hey, I just want to ask you a question. If the test comes back as inconclusive, what happens then? He goes, well, then we have to retest. And I said, okay. And what happens when we test again and it comes back inconclusive? He said, we'll have to retest again.
Oh,
my
God.
I said, so no. Can't you just say she's not pregnant at that point? He goes, no, we can't. I go, well, then at what point do you like, what happens if she tests the third time? He goes, the third time, the third time we would probably ask for a doctor at that point to get involved to kind of explain what's going on.
The third time? Lord.
And so at that point, I made a very bold decision in my eyes where I said, you know what? I said, all right, thank you. I hang up the phone with him. And I said, well, Clayton, I said, my fem tuition.
Good for you.
Was kicking. And I said, I'm not going to let this drag. I see exactly what she's going to do. She's going to keep taking these tests until like and they're going to keep coming back inconclusive. And then she's just going to hope it dies off. And so I was like, nope, not doing this. I believe in my heart she's not pregnant, and I'm going to make a statement.
You guys, it's winter, but that has literally no impact on my desire to sleep warm or my husband. So my husband still sweats at nighttime, even like when he's sleeping, even in the wintertime. Anyways, your bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold or sweating even in the winter, like my husband does, I highly recommend checking out Miracle Made's bed sheets. So Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA, and they use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating. So you can basically like sleep at the perfect temp all night long, right? Whether you sleep cold like me or hot like him. Traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat, which can lead to acne, allergy, stuffy noses. It's just really gross. So Miracle Made not only regulates your temperature, but they offer a whole line of self-cleaning antibacterial bed sheets, pillowcases, comforters, and they prevent up to 99.7% of bacteria growth. They are basically designed for your skin and designed for comfort. So think of bacteria can clog your pores. You guys know I'm a beauty and skincare and makeup girl. The bacteria can clog your pores and give you like breakouts, acne. Sleep clean with Miracle, and they are so luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of luxury brands. And they're really nice, like even like some of the 5-star hotel sheets that you feel. Anyways, upgrade your sleep this year. Go to trymiracle.com trymiracle.com/TDD to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo TDD at checkout, you'll get a free 3-piece towel set and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/TDD and use code TDD to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/TDD to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle, for sponsoring this episode.
So I went on my social media and released a video and said, like, test results came back, little to no fetal DNA. Let's go. Like, I knew she wasn't pregnant. Like, I knew that she wasn't pregnant.
Wait, so you just said that even though it didn't come
pregnant.
I, at that point, was calling her bluff. I was putting all my chips on black. I was like, I am not going to wait for you to do another test. This is bullshit, and you know it.
So what happened? Did you get what happened?
Yeah.
So I, at that point, was like, I was basically trying to end it right there. I was like, I'm going to end this because this is ridiculous.
Once and so for all.
But I also came to the conclusion, and I was like, I was running the risk where I was like, if she comes back, takes the second test, and it comes back that I am the father, I am canceled. I am basically going to be never believed ever again, and my reputation will forever be ruined.
But you knew in your gut.
But in my gut, I was like, you know what? I feel in my gut that she's faking it. So I'm not going to wait. I'm going to risk it. And if I happen to be wrong, then I will go forever get off social media, and I will just be like, you know what? My reputation is ruined, and so be it. But I was like, you know what? No, like, I, in my heart, feel that she's lying. And so I post that video. She's like going ballistic in my email. Take that down. That's not true. I got to take another test. So she goes on Reddit. She's like telling them, like, I'm going to take another test next week. And I'm just like, no, this is ridiculous. So she's like, I'm going to take another test in a week. So some people are like, okay, I guess we'll wait for another week. And I'm like, this is bullshit. Well, then I get a message, the family court's going to close. They're like, hey, there's been inactivity. You guys aren't submitting anything in this court. If you don't submit anything in the next 30 days, that we're going to close this down. And I, in that moment, was like, no, I don't want you to close it down. In fact, I'm going to now use my lawyers that I have, and I'm going to file documents to make you have to prove that you were pregnant, because I see where this is going. So basically, I was like, no, I'm going to file and make her have to prove that she's pregnant. So I get these lawyers on, and the lawyer that I have that's the same lawyer from the previous guy. At this point, I had known about the prior victim. So I had a discussion with the previous victim about his previous representation, and then asked to be given his name so that I could reach out and talk with that lawyer. And at first, this lawyer was like, I didn't want to be a part of it, but then realized this is public and she's never going to stop. And so he was like, okay, I'll represent you. And so he's been incredible, and his whole team's been awesome. So the whole game plan was to basically make her prove that she was pregnant, because my concern to them was, hey, she's going to eventually have a miscarriage, or something's going to happen to these phantom children that don't exist, never did exist, but yet they'll somehow cease to exist and she'll just move on. But the damage will already be done. And so I had a conversation with my lawyers and said, I would like to file something that forces her to prove pregnancy. I didn't even know if that was possible. I just felt it was common sense that there's got to be a way to file this to make her have to prove it. You can't just say something and not back it up with evidence, and then that be it for court. So I was like, hey, let's get her to disclose the evidence that she claims she has, which she won't give me. Can we get the court to force her essentially to provide that information? So that's where they came up with the legal aspect as far as how exactly do we do that, and what do we file. But I'd made my intentions clear to them that I wanted to have her provide proof. And so they're like, we're going to help you hopefully put an end to this. So we file all these documents, and she's emailing me like, let's close this case. And I'm like, no.
Hell to the no.
We file in court. So we had 2 evidentiary hearings. And in the first one, all of us were there in person and had our representation. And while we were there, very smartly, my lawyer had said, hey, Judge Amato, we are just trying to get our medical records, and she's not providing them to us. And my lawyers were like, we want her to sign off so that we can get her HIPAA records, get all of her health records.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't give them to me prior. I had asked her from the very beginning to give me access to her health records, and she wouldn't. And I was like, that's another reason why I didn't believe her. I was like, you're not letting me talk to your doctors. Why would I believe you? I can't talk to any of these doctors that you've seen.
Yeah.
And so finally in court, my lawyer goes, hey, we have the paperwork right here. All she has to do is sign. And the judge goes, well, will you sign it? And she's like, her eyes got big. She's like, yeah. And so she signs it because she had no choice. Like in her eyes, she's like on the spot. And she says, no, the judge would be like, well, why won't you sign it?
Yeah.
So she signs it, and then boom, my lawyers go to work, and she claims that she saw 8 to 10 different doctors, and every one of them got back to us and said they had no record of her.
What?
Oh.
So now the medical records that she did send to me are now fraudulent. They're medical fraud because she never actually saw those doctors. And then sure enough, we end up getting a court date set. And this was last year in 2024, in June or July. We have a court case, and people from across the world like fly in to watch this. We had, I think there was 50 people that flew in from all over the country and showed up to support us. And it was really powerful. They stood outside the court. So when I walked up, there was, people there cheering us on, walking in. So I show up, there's max security. I walk out, get out of my car. There's armed guards. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is like, and I'm walking up, and then I see her walking up at the same time. So I stop, she walks by, her mom's there with her. And
what's going through your head?
Well, I'm just infuriated. Like, I'm pissed off because I just couldn't believe that she even showed up. So now we go into courts in July, and it's like, we're basically, stating that she can't prove she's pregnant after all this time. Mm-hmm. And we would also like to have her referred to the county attorney for prosecution on charges of medical fraud. And it was medical fraud and perjury. So we wanted to get referred to the county attorney for perjury. Well, in that entire court hearing, it goes on for like an hour and a half or whatever. And at the end of it, ultimately, which was also streamed, it's live streamed. That entire hearing was live streamed, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And so at the end of it, the judge rules in our favor and then refers her to the county attorney for prosecution.
What?
And in the court case, at one point, they're like, so you committed medical fraud. She was like, well, just like a little bit. And we all gasped.
Oh my God.
But ultimately, the judge saw that this girl's completely making all this up. There's no evidence. She has a track record based on all that. The most important thing was she submitted a statement saying that she was never pregnant. So now she could never bring it up in the future, like, and say, like, I was pregnant. It's like, no, now there's a court finding
saying that
like,
you're admitting you were not pregnant.
So now if she were to claim that she was, I was like, technically I can use this as defamation and say, hey, I have a court finding to say that this court's ruled that she was never pregnant, or they found that she wasn't pregnant. So now I can sue you for defamation because you're lying after you lost a court case. And so afterwards, one of the individuals that flew in said, hey, I'm having a gathering and many of you are welcome to come to the house. So it was a celebration. Yeah, we all popped in and hung out, and people were swimming in the pool, and it was just like a birthday party celebration. It's kind of what it felt like. It was, the end to all this madness, at least for the time being. And we were all celebrating the fact that she was referred to the county attorney for prosecution. It was like the ultimate outcome that we were hoping for. We got everything we wanted: legal fees awarded and the referral. Those were and basically also a finding of non-paternity. So I got everything that I'd wanted out of that case. So it was a win across the board. So yeah, we all celebrated and just felt like it was over at that point. But we knew that there was going to be an appeal process. We knew that she wasn't going to go away, but we also knew that her power had been taken from her, and now it's hopefully up to the courts to take the rest of that power from her. And now at this point, she's still being investigated. Rachel Mitchell, which is the county attorney, is investigating her. And so we're awaiting a response. So right now.
How long has it been since the court case ended?
Since June or July, whenever that court case was. So
wow.
We've been waiting. It takes a while. That's what their investigators told me. Like, hey, it takes a while to, but yeah, she's being actively investigated right now. So that brings us to present day. I did this podcast because I saw you guys have, it's very relevant to like this story, what I've went through. Mm-hmm. And until Rachel Mitchell makes the decision, I'm going to still put this out there for more people to latch onto, because it's wrong. and accountability needs to be had. And sometimes you got to put a little pressure, out there. There needs to be an action taken. If you just drop this and say like, oh, whatever, like we're not going to prosecute her, she's going to do it again.
Yeah.
And again and again, because I found out a week or two ago, apparently there's 2 more victims.
Oh no, more people are coming forward.
And so there's like 7 now. And I'm like, there's going to be 8, 9, 10, and 11. And what agitates me is like, I'm a big mental health advocate, is I was in a really dark spot. When I was going through all this, I had suicidal ideation. I had multiple points where I was like, my life is just, I can't keep fighting. Those were the thoughts that were coming in my head. And so I was in a really dark spot, and I talked to some of the previous guys, and they were like, there were multiple times where I thought like, I don't know if I can do this any longer. And so what really agitates me is that she continues to push. And I'm like, you've almost taken people off this planet because you can't take accountability. And that's what infuriates me. My agitation lies in the fact that if she doesn't get prosecuted, she'll do this again. And what it's going to take, someone killing themselves, because that's what's going to happen.
Yep.
And abusers bank on that. It's like they want to beat you down.
Yeah.
Until you give in, because what the alternative to the darkest option is just like, fine, whatever you say.
Yeah.
So, okay, but let's go back to The Bachelor. Okay, so how do you think the being on The Bachelor and being kind of in that public eye in that way affected your situation with her?
So I think what she targeted me, she said early on, you're not well liked. She said in an email, I didn't watch The Bachelor, but I've looked you up and I found the clips from the show. And I see you're not a well-liked bachelor. And like, how do you think people are going to respond when they find out you're a deadbeat dad? So she was using that against me. And I think, again, targeted me because she was like, everyone's not going to believe him when I do this, and I can destroy them and everyone will believe him because he's not well-liked. Wow. So I do believe that absolutely, if I was a well-liked bachelor, I would have not had either of these accusations against me, the cheating scandal or the paternity scandal. I think I was a target because
it was easy to target you because you're already an asshole. So of course you're going to be an asshole in her case.
That not only that, but even like a people pleaser and a pushover. I think I gave that off. I had no self-love and self-confidence, and I was open about my
studied you. Yeah. And this is what they do. They find the ways that they can connect with you.
I was open about my struggles on mental health. So she knew and everybody else knew that I was struggling with self-love and that I was, really struggling in general, just with acclimating post-show. And so she saw weakness and she thought like, hey, I can overcome this man because he's already beaten down. She didn't think I was going to have the fight that I had in me. That's one of my biggest gifts is my resiliency that only has gotten stronger through this. She didn't know the fight that I had in me when she went public, just being like, all right, let's do it. Let's shine a bigger spotlight on it. And that was not what she expected. And so to that reporter that was like, this could be the best thing that ever happened. It was. That spotlight got me, lawyered up. That spotlight got me, all the court of a public opinion on my side. And now that spotlight has her being looked into for prosecution. So
I will say, like, one of the best things that has come out of this is my friendships with her previous victims.
I've gotten to know the previous 2 victims. Some of the guys I tried to reach out to and they didn't want anything to do with it. It's been long enough for them where they're just like, they don't want to be back in the spotlight or be, they're just like, they want to live a private life. And so did these guys, but they got dragged into this because, like they reached out and then their names were in the documents. So they were uncovered through those documents. And so, I had a lot of conversations with, I'll just say one of the previous guys. And like, he, told me, he's like, man, I early on before like we got the, the judgment and won in court, he was like, I just don't know, dude, if you can't stop her, who can? He's like, I was a nobody. He's like, I was just some regular guy with no audience. And now you're fighting her, but we're still in court. You've been fighting this for almost a year. And like all the evidence points to her being guilty. And yet we're still waiting on a court date to happen. He goes, I'll be honest with you. Like, if this doesn't work, we'll never win. So he goes, to be honest with you, he goes, I lost hope years ago. And so when I found out it was you, he's like, I got a little bit of a glimmer thinking like maybe this guy can stop her since he has a name behind him. But I've recently started to lose that hope again because you're going through the exact same thing I'm going through and like you're not gaining any ground. And he's like, if this doesn't work, like I don't know, man, like it'll never end and I'll have to basically deal with this for the rest of my life. And I just don't want to think that that's going to be a possibility. And so I've hung out with these guys, met them, spent time with them and become close to them because we shared trauma. And when we won, man, it was awesome. When we won, we went out that night or we celebrated like the guys because they were there. They were in the courthouse with me. They showed up. So to have their support there was just like, I mean, it was just incredible. Like to have them, sit there in the back there with me. And it was a powerful too to the judge to be like, hey, here's 2 people, like 2 previous guys, victims right here. It's not just me, it's them. And I got a text, I think it was like a few days after, by one of the guys. And he said, dude, he goes, I cried my eyes out when I went home because we finally won. He's like, we finally won. After all this time, I finally feel like this might actually be over. He's like, I lost myself along the way.
Some glimmer of hope.
He's like, I didn't know like if this was going to be my new life. He goes, people that were closest to me always wondered if I was telling the truth. And now, like with this win, everybody believes me. You've given me redemption. I finally can let go. And to hear that, I was like, it meant the world to me. I was like, I was a voice for the voiceless, for this is why it happened to me and not some other random person. Like this was meant to happen to me.
Because you could be that voice.
Because I could be that guy to save these 2 or 3 or 4 other men and stop future guys from falling victim to her. So, that gave me all the power in the world.
Well, you're helping people by sharing your story beyond what is necessary too. I mean, we told you at the beginning that we don't get a lot of men. Like we've had one man come on, we had one man's sister come on, but a lot of men don't want to talk about things like this that have happened to them. So it was nice to hear about your connection to the other victims. But I mean, do you have, I know you said mental health for men, specifically advocacy, like
why do you think it is so much harder for men to come forward about stuff like this? And also, how can we make it easier?
It's that fear of judgment. It's deeply rooted, and a lot of men suppress their emotions because growing up, whether it's the culture we were raised in, where all the movies we watched were these macho men that were football players or soldiers, and you don't see them cry, you see them kicking ass and getting the women. They're the alpha males, and it's that coupled with playing football. I played a gladiator sport, so it's like you're expected to be the baddest of the baddest, like the absolute alpha male. You're a beast, And
it's just so funny because football is just like a lot of hugging. Like I don't know why we haven't made that connection.
A lot of hugging and ass slapping too. I do think social media is starting to turn a bit. There's a shift. And I love this. I see a lot of athletes. I love that Travis and Jason Kelce, they'll get emotional and they'll cry on the show. And I love it. I think it's awesome. There's a lot of men that look up to athletes in general, rappers, people of influence. And so we need more people of influence stepping up. The other guy I was thinking of was AJ Brown. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And a reporter basically brought up she was struggling, and he told her a story of his struggles with mental health and how he thought at one point of taking his own life. And this is one of the most successful and best wide receivers in the NFL right now. Like he doesn't have to share this. He could just be seen as like that, he's the best strong macho man. And yet this man's being vulnerable. And I loved it. I saw that and I was like, this is awesome. Like these are the guys that men, it's going to rack their brains because the frustrating part, but it's just the reality of it. There's a lot of young men that will be like, if they see a 5'6" guy crying, they'll be like, oh, he's soft, or he's, another, he's a pussy or whatever. Like that's what they'll say. But when they see a 6'5", 250-pound man crying, their brains, you can just see it. Their brains are like, it's like they're like cracking. Like when I would go speak,
this doesn't calculate.
Yeah, like when I would go speak to middle school, I used to speak to middle schools and high schools about mental health, and that got sidetracked whenever this whole allegation came up. I would go speak to these kids, and then afterwards, I would get calls the next day from the superintendent saying, like, we had 3 kids admit themselves to the counselor.
Oh,
that they were going to take their life, or they were thinking about it, and that your story gave them hope. And so these kids, like, they are impressionable, and they do. I remember when I was in high school, I had 2 NFL athletes show up. It was Jeremy Maclin and Denario Alexander. They were Rams players, and they showed up and they could have said anything. I sponged up every single thing they said because I was like, these guys are NFL athletes. And so whatever they say, it's like their words matter, And so, that's what we need. We need more macho men. I think The Rock has spoken up about it, which I love,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Dwayne Johnson's talked about it, and it's like, that's what we need, and we're getting it. I think I've seen Jason Momoa talk about it, but men of all shapes and sizes and colors need to speak up on it, right? Yeah. That's what we need. We need more of that. They need to show more of that in movies, men being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then we need to also, women have to be willing to, to support that. And I see a lot of women that do, but I do still see some women that are like, I want a real man. I don't want a man that cries. So I think it's an acclimation period. There's some women that grew up in a household where they never saw their father shed a tear. And so like, that's what they expect out of men.
Yeah.
So like, it's just going to take a shift, and there's going to always be this resistance to change. But I am genuinely encouraged. I think we are seeing a lot of high profile men that are speaking up and making a difference. And now there's TikTok and men are speaking up and influencers. And it's just, I think we're seeing a lot of change. So
you just gave me such hope because I know there's so many bad men on TikTok and I like
there's the bad ones too,
highlighting the ones
I
that
want to
are...
see that more on our show too, because like, I feel like you said it started in 7th grade. You were feeling these feelings of inadequacy, and that's not something that a lot of people really acknowledge. And so I think it'd be great to say, so we here on the Dating Detectives, we call people that are liars, like this person who said she was pregnant, we call them dogfish. So a catfish is basically like, they're using someone else's picture online, pretending to be someone not. A dogfish is like, they're who they say they are, but they are a liar, or they're,
but they're pregnant with twins.
Pregnant with twins. Yeah, right. They're lying, whatever. So you got dogfish is what we say. And so we have a lot of women that come on and they'll share their story about being dogfish. And a lot of them talk about feeling stupid. Like, I felt so stupid that he was able to do that to me or whatever. And so it's nice to have a guy come on and tell his story. Like, I got duped.
And it happens to, this is consistent across the genders. It's always smart, successful, wonderful people.
Yeah. Did you ever feel stupid? Like, oh, I can't believe she got me. Like,
I had moments again, like I saw stuff online because I get tagged and stuff all the time. So I saw people saying like, he's just an idiot. And I was like, am I? But then I went back and looked at the messages and I was like, no, I think any one of these people would have fallen for this. I think when people, I was like, if you were in my shoes, like you say that I'm stupid for believing this, but like she was really good at being believable.
That's what we tell our guests all the time when they're telling their stories. They're like, gosh, I just felt so stupid. It's like, no, this has nothing to do with being smart or stupid. Like, this is totally about them, like, not you.
The thought process I had at one point when I was like, do I believe this or do I not believe this? It was, I'm either dealing with the craziest woman I've ever met in my life, or she's telling the truth. And it was this or that. It was black or white. It was right or wrong. It was like, either she's the craziest woman I've ever met, or she's telling the truth. And at first, my brain was not willing to believe that I was actually interacting with somebody this diabolical. We don't
think that way.
It actually made more sense in my head that this woman had to be telling the truth, because there's no way I'm actually dealing with this level of crazy. So again, I tried to reason and put a rationale behind it. And I think that's what mostly everybody else would have done too, is like, well, she's adamant. So like, if someone's this adamant, like either they're that off their rocker, and I've met one of the craziest people to ever exist, or she's telling the truth. Which one's more likely? Probably the truth in this instance.
Not me.
Like,
I don't ever
otherwise. Well, no, but because you've been in this. Yes. So like you're already like on, and now I am too. So now I'm like, always on the lookout. But if you're innocent, like I was all innocent until now I'm like, oh wait, like now I'm very cautious. Yeah. Now I'm very like.
That's what we want this podcast to be. They're validating for people who have been through stuff and they can feel less alone. Or, we're not trying to turn people off from love. We just want you to have that nice mix of optimism and caution and live through these stories through our podcast so you can learn from them.
Yeah.
And I feel like yours will help a lot of people, because you're right. Like, you don't go into a date or anything thinking like, maybe they'll frame me and take me to court and ruin my life.
Thank you so much for telling your story to us. I think our audience will especially appreciate it. I think it's interesting to have a nice regular dude come on the show, tell a story like, hey, I got duped. Like this woman took me for a ride. And I think it maybe will encourage more men to share their story. And like you said, like make it like normalize men being able to
be vulnerable.
Not have to have that. Yeah. To be vulnerable, not have that hyper masculinity. Like they can just kind of, So I hope that more people have the conversations about what happened to them.
It happens more than people realize. I tell people it's not common, but it's more common than you think. And I've had probably 15 DMs that people that are like, my friend or my brother or my cousin was involved in a situation just like this. But I also, like as in they were being, a girl claimed she's pregnant when she wasn't. But I've also had, women say like, hey, I went through something where I wasn't believed in the workplace and this person tried to destroy me. And then, and they were like, so in a way, I know how you feel. Mm-hmm. And so it's really cool when you're also able to connect with people that haven't went through that exact same thing, but something similar. And so you still can give those individuals hope. So,
100%. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And honestly, to have a man that has your platform to connect with on that is rare. I think a lot of women are just kind of we're surrounded by other women who are like, we got you, girl. And it's like, yeah, but we need everybody to support. And I hate that this happened to you. But
if this can happen to someone like him, then you're like, okay, then I don't feel so bad.
Disclaimer, wish it didn't happen to you.
Yeah. And well, right. But I think, again, too, people, I've heard this. He doesn't look like a victim. And it's like, that's so messed up. Anybody can be a victim.
Look like?
Well, yeah, again, they because people think that like, oh, he's got so much going for him. Boo hoo. I don't feel bad for him. I've read that online and I was just like, that's crazy. It's like, you take it on a case by case basis. That's my biggest thing is like, we should believe women all the same. You shouldn't hear my story and then be like, well, I'm going to not ever believe women ever again. It's like, no, that's not, and that was the concern that people had was
just like, to bring awareness.
Like, let's just all understand that victims come in all different shapes and sizes and anybody can be one. So stop downplaying and minimizing what someone's went through because you just can't believe it. Like,
because of who they are, regardless.
Because of who they are. Like, stop, like, take out your prejudice, take out your bias and be open-minded. Also question and ask yourself, where is this bias coming from? Why can't I see Clayton as the victim?
What's the name of your podcast, by the way?
It's called Beyond the Cover.
And you're still putting it out?
Yeah, I'm still doing it.
It's a mental health podcast.
I enjoy it. I mean, because I've learned a lot. I'm learning a lot from women and I get to, ask a lot of good questions that I probably should have learned years ago, but I didn't have sisters or whatever. And now I'm learning and I was like,
oh my God, you learning publicly is so valuable to other men.
And relatable.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I'm not embarrassed anymore. I'm like, I am what I am. Like, I love me for all that I am, even the shortcomings of, kind of being a bonehead sometimes. I look at it like, hey, like, I love everything about me, even the stuff that I got to work on. Cause it's like, it's just because I am who I am. And like, I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be. If I lack in an area, then it's great. I put it out online on a podcast. And I'm like, awesome. Like, tell me what I lack so I can go focus on it. So people nowadays, they like, he needs to work on this. I'm like, thank you. There goes that. That's what I'm not. That's what I'm going to lock in on for the next 2 months.
Wow. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate you. I want to go. Can you watch those on like Netflix or like, where's the episodes? I'm gonna go watch.
Or are you saying all the court cases?
No, the Bachelor.
Well, both.
Oh. Seems like, please don't go watch it. It's fine.
Well, I will say for those that want to get caught up, there's a Justice for Clayton Instagram page. And they have basically documented it all in chronological order. They have like a little like story thing you can click on where it's like begin here. And so I've been very blessed by these fans of the show and fans of me and just people that are now friends that I've met in person that showed up at the court that basically have created this Instagram page and it's on Reddit as well. But they're posting constantly because they want her to be held accountable. So you can click on there. They have all the videos, the court hearings, if you want to dive into like all the court hearings. But then for the Bachelor stuff, I believe my season, The Bachelor, is now on Hulu.
It was so nice to meet you and talk to you. And I'm grateful that you came here to tell your story. And now you're a part of our community of sleuthies that just kind of, enjoy these. I think it just, anytime someone tells their story, it just makes people feel less alone. So thank you again so much. It's so nice to have you.
Yeah. And thanks guys for giving me a voice on your platform. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Yikes. I'm excited. You guys, I love a Hannah Dogfish debrief. I really do, because I really feel like they're always so thoughtful and you always catch things that like I didn't catch. So I'm dying.
Mackenzie, I feel the same way because I feel like you have such a great perspective and sense of humor about that bleak perspective. It's the best combo. I hope you know that like the way that you have filtered things through your experience, but also managed to like be informative and light about it is like, I think the reason that you stand out, because
I love you so much.
We don't lose complete hope when we hear about what you've seen.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, well, we know that exists now. But no, so okay, girl.
Clayton, I'm glad that Clayton and the other boys and that they are, feeling vindicated and that they've gotten legal support for her, because I do think she's a nut. She's a psycho.
Were you genuinely shocked when you realized, like in the part of the story who's like there was more victims? I was shocked.
Yeah, I was shocked.
I was like, there's no way she's doing this to more than one person, or no way that she's just doing this like all willy-nilly all the time. Like, there's no way
It's
anybody would do this more
diabolical.
than. Yeah, it is. It is.
I also think that he's famous, so it made sense to me that she would be targeting only a famous person, which is very common. And there are things. This is he's not anonymous. Just so you know, we have to be a bit delicate in the way we speak about his case, just because for like many, it's a real case, and usually our cases are anonymous. So
Yeah.
But like I was just thinking about other cases where trapping is kind of what they call it, where it's like women try to get pregnant with somebody's baby so that they can get their child support forever. And it's like NFL and sports ball people. And I think the main takeaway that I would say I have from her behavior is that she is taking advantage of a system that is built by
other women,
abused women. Yeah. And women who have had to fight for support, for keeping themselves and their child alive,
real pregnancies. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know.
You're absolutely right.
I was nervous on it. It's nice that you started and you're like, I'm so excited to talk about this with you. And I'm like, I'm excited, but I've been nervous because I think it's a really delicate conversation that I don't have answers for. So I wanted to just level with everybody and be like, this is ongoing. I don't think we have to be perfect in the way we have this conversation as long as we have it. So,
well, here's why it's hard, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The reason that it's hard is because as women, generally speaking, we have more sympathy for a woman. And so when we think of, oh, this guy got conned by this woman, it's like, oh, but then he shouldn't have put his pee in her V, or he shouldn't have put himself in a position where she could say that. Or do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't say guilty. I'm just acknowledging my bias. Like I'm someone who jokes, but it's a half joke where I'm like, I support women's rights and women's wrongs. Like I'm usually like the first person to step up and be like, I always say like equity more than equality. It's like, when women have, like he talked about getting an order of protection and how it was more difficult for him as a man to get it than a woman. And that's a difficult thing because in many cases, I do understand statistically why women have an easier time getting that kind of support because, stalkers are typically men. Like that's just the numbers. That is absolutely not to say that he didn't have total rights to that protection as well. And I know that I appreciate his understanding of the conversation and I feel for him to feel like I am nervous to come forward because I know that what I say will hurt women who really should be believed. And I know that this is something I can't do without that part of the conversation involved. And I can't imagine. And I hope that we kind of said it when we talked to him, like
women should be protected, but men should be too if they're going through, it's hard. But also, whenever you brought up earlier about the other victims and how they're not famous, right? And so that's why they couldn't get the help they needed was because they're not famous. And I thought that was interesting too, was that when you're in the public eye, then you have, it's more likely someone's going to reach out and say, hey, we'll do this for you pro bono. Cause then they want to put their name attached to your name so that they can say they worked or whatever, cause now it's in the public eye. But
just access to resources too.
Yes, access to resources. But these other victims were not famous. And so I think that played a role too. So all of it all together is just crazy interesting.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more men telling their story. And I want to create a safe place for men to tell their story of being dogfish. Like it can't just be only women out here or only men out here dogfishing.
Oh, absolutely not. And I think it's also okay. Like a lot of people, I'm like looking at the comments, people saying like, yeah, I did look at it differently. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like we can look at these scenarios differently as long as we look at them with the same level of compassion and just know that we are trying to, but we are, products of our experience. And we are both people who have gone through abuse and like, it's different. And that's why his story is important. And I'm glad he has a podcast. Beyond the Cover, guys, go listen.
Yeah, Beyond the Cover. And everybody, I just feel like there were so many people with differing opinions.
Can I read some?
Yeah,
ahead,
please.
I'll read some.
No, I was just going to say no one was like outlandishly like disrespectful or unkind. And that just goes to show you it's possible to disagree, but still have respect and love for one another. But yeah, read some of the comments.
Period. Okay, someone said, first I didn't believe the guy, but when it got to the twins, I just knew he's dealing with the psycho. Yeah, somebody also asked about like why don't we just do a paternity test and call it a day, which this episode answered. But having twins involved, a lot of times paternity tests are not as credible because there's a chance that it could be two different
Yep, two different dads. And I thought that was interesting too.
I had no idea.
But for her to know that, you got to do some fucking research. Like you have had to either do this before or do a lot of research. Like there was a lot of research that went into conning Clayton. If this was a giant con, she put a lot of effort into it.
No, they know what dogfish know what they're very good at what they do.
That's why everybody's like, oh, I feel so dumb. Like, don't feel dumb when something like this happens to you, because these are people who, like you said, diabolical.
Some of you have followed the case. There are other resources. Go take a look if you want to hear more about his case. He's very open about it. Some people are like, it happens to men as much as women, really, which is like, yeah, there's not clear evidence on any of it. And I think it's different cases, but they're happening to everybody. I did already mention the comment that was like, it was a roller coaster because in the beginning, I believed what he said. Then my femtuition told me he was full of BS. But the further into the story I got, the more I thought about why I kept doubting him. I think I just have this mistrust of men trying to convince everyone that they're not the father.
Yep.
But if I can believe in the women on this podcast, then I can also believe in the men. I don't know.
It's
Just
true.
had to share my thoughts with someone. And I think
That's
that kind of
point.
skepticism, I wouldn't beat yourself up for having that distrust because that is real, but it's also so amazing that you can be like, let me look inward and decide.
And acknowledge that there could be, there could be some there could be some truth to what he's saying.
But your experience shapes your worldview and your experience is real. So if you're somebody that's like uncomfortable by certain situations or certain types of people based on what you've been through, as long as you're not hurting anybody, like protect yourself and validate that experience and, work through that with your own healing journey. This is a longer conversation, but you know what I mean? Like I understand people who are like, I'm uncomfortable by my experience with this type of person. I know that not all of that type of person is a villain, but it's okay that I'm still dealing with trauma.
And I think that a lot of people really struggled with the fact that he's a cocky guy. Like this guy knows he's good looking. He knows that he's successful. He knows that he was on these shows. He feels cool about it. He loves that he can get whatever woman he wants. You know what I mean? Like he knows that about himself and it makes him a little cocky. And I think that lack or that perception of a lack of humility puts people off and they'll be like, this guy is a cocky son of a bitch, whatever, but then also to be like, he's cocky, but also a victim. For a lot of people, that doesn't calculate. It's like, recalculating. It doesn't make sense to them that someone can be so cocky, but also a victim.
I agree. And to that point, somebody did comment and I appreciate them reaching out. I haven't looked into the Blake. They said, I hope you guys update the whole Blake Lively situation. We talked about that as I just brought it up as an example of the perfect victim concept, which is what you just described, where it's like, we kind of expect our victims to be like,
yes,
exactly fitting the perfect bill, where that is not realistic, nor is that fair to that specific scene. I haven't looked into it, so I will. They just were like, more has come out and they have their opinions about it. So that's fair. I'll look into it more, but that's not, the case we were talking about. It was more just a pop culture example. But
yeah.
That's a tricky one. Celebrity cases, I think, are used to be examples for everything in our personal lives, and they're different. There are a different number of resources.
Yep.
Which is a good thing, because I think people like, I loved when Taylor Swift sued the guy that touched her for $1. Like she was like, I'm not here for the money. I just like the principle.
I'm making a point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm making a point. And it was like that kind of thing is what, Clayton is able to do in some ways. Like people who have a platform can use it for that, but it's also like with a grain of salt, like they're in a different world. Then I love this comment. Somebody was like, you guys are so respectful and considerate in the debriefs, but sometimes like we think that pointing out lessons learned is equal to being judgmental, which I'm going to think about. I don't know that I can't think of.
I would like an example of that.
Yeah. I think maybe they're just saying like I think sometimes people want us to say like, they should have done this differently to protect themselves, which is really not what we're here to do. We're just here to move forward. Like we're not here to tell anyone that they did anything wrong, because it's not what they're asking from us, like I don't give advice unless someone asks me for advice.
Right.
And I'm not qualified to say, if you had really had this protection in place, you wouldn't have been dogfished. It's more just like we hear the story, we validate the story, and then we say, what can we learn from the story?
Yeah. No,
So
I agree with you. I
mean?
think there's a lesson to be learned from everything, whether or not we feel like you did something wrong. I guess I would really like an example of that, though. I would like to know more about, like, I would like that in more context. I would.
Sure.
That's a good conversation to have.
This is fun. We should do this on Patreon where we just kind of read comments from you guys and respond, because sometimes our response is like, fair. We don't really know what exactly to do right now, but let's talk about it. And then that was just on like Spotify. So I know most of the comments are just like support for Clayton, honestly. And a lot of you just think this is crazy. The fact that she's done this more than once. And it's so sad. And it's so unfair to people who genuinely need these systems in place. And that goes for all kinds of abuse. It's very upsetting.
And also, this is just his story. Like, this is that's just his side of the story. We don't know, like, I would love to hear from her and be like, well, this is what I like. Do you know what I mean? Like, come tell me your side.
Oh, this is unrelated. I'm going back. I did a little research on how to fake a pregnancy test, which I'm not saying that's what she did. I was just curious. I didn't like get a tutorial or anything, which I don't think we need. I don't want to. What if I was like on Instagram, like, hey guys, here's a quick tutorial on how to fake a pregnancy test to trap your man.
God.
That would be kick me off the app. There's like a hormone, the HCG hormone is something that people can use to fake a pregnancy test, but we don't know. I mean, maybe she was pregnant with somebody else's baby.
So there are like you take an HCG test to find out like if you're ovulating, if you're pregnant, and that like is an immediate, like you pee on a strip and that's it, right? But like where would you get positive HCG?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard. I'm not saying just look it up if you're worried or something.
Go on the Google machine, you'll find it. But like, it's interesting that something like that is even possible. It's one thing to give like an ultrasound, a fake ultrasound image or whatever, but then
that was so funny, honestly, that she had already been caught for just pulling it from Google. So she was like, let me be smarter this time.
Okay, so I was reading an audiobook. That
counts.
And one part of the book, they were talking about how someone said, I had to make sure to go to the 20th page of Google search images so that it couldn't easily be traced back. And I was like, so that's the trick. If you want to, because people aren't going to scroll through 20 pages. Mackenzie Foltz will. I will scroll through 700. And the sleuthies, like I have nothing but time. Like I will scroll through don't put it past me to go through page 765 of the Google images. Like, yes, I will. But like I will hit next until kingdom comes. Say I won't, but most people won't. And so I thought that was really interesting. That was an interesting tidbit that like the deeper it is on the Google machine, the less likely an image
people
searcher
are to find it.
Yeah, that it'll be found. Gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, if we didn't talk about anything, there was a lot here. So let us know if there's more that you want us to go into on Patreon. Like if we just like there's a topic we didn't quite hit.
Yeah.
I think new people. Thank you if you're a new Bachelor listener. If you came from, we met at Acme, another dating podcast not that long ago during the holidays. So we didn't really talk as much about it, but go listen to that episode. And then the medical detectives.
I know we're called the dating detectives, but this is so much more than dating. This is marriages. This is friendships. This is work relationships. Like I think dating detectives was more of an initial concept, but and so like the name stuck, double D.
Guys, the name is amazing.
It is kind of amazing, but it's so much more than dating too. So just keep that in mind when you're submitting your stories. Like this isn't just about dating. Like we've talked to people who've been in like 20-year marriages and they're getting dogfish. Like, you know what I mean? So it's so much more. People that have work relationships with someone who wasn't who they said they were, and you freaking name it. So
we're so here for all of you. And if it's medical, go to the medical detectives now because there's an expanded network of detectives.
So many people have said such good things about, and there's only been one episode.
I'm so excited. It's necessary. I think it's important, and they're fun hosts. So hopefully that's what makes it easier to digest.
Like you said earlier, everyone's gone through something like medical or has it know somebody who went through something where it was like, no way, like that's crazy. Have you ever seen that show Sex Sent Me to the ER?
I have not seen it, but I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's like people that like they were doing something a little situational and they had to go to the ER and get something yanked out or cut out or shoved in or something.
I feel like every nurse specifically has stories of like the things that the objects.
Nurses have some stories. So many medical staff. Yeah. It's wild.
Oh my God. They should do that as their Patreon. They keep it serious. And then on Patreon, they're just like, another episode of things nurses have pulled out of butts.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
They're going to be like,
the medical community knows what's up. Like they're like, yeah, you guys have no idea the things that happen in the hospital in the ER.
Wow. Thank you for talking to me. I needed a combo of distraction and also just, this is a crazy story and we had a lot of things to cover today.
I'll be honest with you. I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like you kind of understand both sides if someone hates him or if someone loves him or if someone doesn't defend him or if they do. I can see both sides of that. And so that's it's like, oh gosh, how should I feel? If you don't know or you haven't, like you said, ironed out your feelings about it, then that's okay too. Do you know what I mean? And it ain't that serial. Like we're here to tell a story. And that's what our goal is to share these stories and talk about them, bring awareness to them, and just make it clear that these are things that really happen to people.
Yeah. So, and the case, is a case that exists. So you can go look up more about it. And I'm glad that he feels, safe from the situation because it's him telling his side of the story. It's our opinions. They are not representative of anything other than us as individuals. And I'm really grateful that and all of those men got that process to work for them. But I also am glad that we get to talk about the implications of that.
Yeah. And it's kind of really scary. But anyways, your thoughts and opinions are so important to us. And so leave a comment on the social media, on the Spotify or wherever you listen. We appreciate it. We also appreciate a 5-star review. So if you get a chance to give us a 5-star review wherever you listen, we really appreciate it. And that helps us to grow the podcast. So thank you for your support. And we love you so much. So send us your stories.
Say the email one more time, just so you
investigate at the Dating Detectives podcast.com. Oh, I almost lost it.
Sometimes we forget the email, guys, but we've gotten so much better.
Why is it so long?
We got to keep ourselves on our toes.
It's all the words and all the plurals, okay?
That's it's in the show notes. Everything's in the show notes. The medical detectives, a link to that is in the show notes. Patreon is in the show notes. And our love is in the show notes. Just know it is, okay? Just feel it.
We love you guys. And thank you for listening. We love you so much. And as always,
trust your intuition.